I had no idea who they were, why they existed, that they would know anything about me.
Dr. Amanda Reeve, a Fresno, California OBGYN, had never heard of ChoicePoint. But ChoicePoint had heard of her. It's ChoicePoint's business to know about you. The company maintains a database that has information on virtually every U.S. citizen. Its trove of personal data, an estimated 17 billion records, includes phone numbers, addresses, credit reports, property records, bank accounts, insurance policies, and Social Security numbers. It sells this information to major corporations, nonprofit organizations, and the government. ChoicePoint's detailed information is used by its clients to conduct employee background checks, direct marketing, and criminal investigations. It's also valuable to thieves intent on stealing our identity. Dr. Reeve didn't know any of that on the day she first heard the name on the radio.
Economic data out today showed double the...
I heard a short piece of the news, something about this place called ChoicePoint. They had some sort of a breach of information. People's identities had been stolen.
In 2005, the Alpharetta, Georgia company discovered it had given accounts and therefore access to its database to identity thieves posing as legitimate businesses. Reeve found out she was at risk when she received this letter.
The letter talked about how my information may have been given out accidentally, and some people might have taken that information and they could apply for credit. Maybe I should call this number.
Reeve is one of about 145,000 people across the U.S. whose ChoicePoint data was stolen in February 2005. Every week, a major breach or loss of data occurs in the U.S. And it's not just ChoicePoint. Bank of America, Paymax, DSW, LexisNexis, MCI, Ralph Lauren, Time Warner, the Department of Justice, Citigroup, Boeing, Ford Motor, the Marines, universities, railroads, and the Department of Veteran Affairs. Just a few of the hundreds of entities that have reported a significant loss of data from hackers, lost laptops, lost backup tapes, or theft. And ironically, during the making of this documentary, General Electric, the parent company of CNBC, informed its correspondent, me, as well as its producer, that a GE laptop with our personal information, including our names and Social Security numbers, was stolen from a hotel room. For Reeve, the breach at ChoicePoint led her to discover 2 credit cards had been issued in her name. The thieves had charged about $7,000. Reeve didn't have to pay, but she is unsettled by the incident all the same.
The aftermath continues. I cannot apply for credit. I don't give information on the phone. It's nerve-wracking because that information is out there, and I don't have any control over which way it goes, how it gets used.
ChoicePoint officials declined to participate in our report. But its CEO Derek Smith did appear on CNBC shortly after the data breach occurred.
We sincerely apologize. I mean, the fact that that they've been, harmed and inconvenienced in any regard is something we take very seriously.
ChoicePoint is one of many corporations whose product is personal information. Increasingly, that information is being used not just by private industry, but by government as well, and for good reason. The Federal Privacy Act of 1974 limits the government's ability to compile dossiers on individual Americans, but there are fewer limits on private industry. And so data mining companies like ChoicePoint have become important tools for law enforcement.
We use a whole host of the, LexisNexis, those kinds of ChoicePoint, the companies that provide these services. The government subscribes to them, so we have access to them.
How important is the use of these databases?
Oh, it saves you days, weeks, months in doing your job. The ability to understand who owns property and the lineage on things. When I first started as an agent in the late 1980s, if I wanted to find out who owned a piece of property, it would require getting in your car, driving down to the public records, going in and doing research, and then finding big pages out of books and photocopying those pages and saying, aha, I've got this information. Now, much of that information, virtually all of it, is available through databases.
My Choice Point report has the social security numbers of all my family members in it, which is useful if I ever want to steal their identity.
Chris Hufnagel is an attorney and consumer advocate.
The biggest problem that we face comes from what's known as a commercial data broker. Companies like Axiom and Experian and ChoicePoint that amass personal information on you from many different sources, including marketing sources and public records. Just as an example, my ChoicePoint report is over 20 pages long, and I'm only in my 30s. So you can imagine that these companies can amass an incredible amount of information about you, including everywhere you've ever lived, the people with whom you've lived, your spouses, your employment information, what cars you drive, what accidents you've been in, pretty much everything about you that triggers a record. And they can use that information for many different purposes, including ones that might end up in you being denied an opportunity.
Julia Hernandez says that's exactly what happened to her.
I did have a really hard time. I didn't have any way to pay for everyday things like gas, utilities.
A single mother who lives in this Illinois suburb, Hernandez had been offered a job as an executive assistant.
I was made an offer, gave my 2 weeks notice with the current employer that I had, and got a phone call from my new employer. They stated they were no longer going to move forward with the hiring process because of some information that came up on my background check.
So you must have been stunned.
Oh, definitely.
Hernandez found out that a company called Verifications, Inc. had done a background check on her and told her new employer that she had a criminal record for theft and resisting arrest.
You've never done either one of those things.
Right, right.
So Hernandez made a trip to the circuit court's office with the file number for the criminal record listed on the background check.
I went on the computers, looked up the information by the case. Once I got that information, I went to the clerk, asked her to give me the file. She gave me the file, looked through it, and to my surprise, it was by another person's name.
Jacqueline Rivera.
That is correct.
How long did you go without a job?
I went without a job 4 months.
Tough 4 months?
Very tough, very tough. I did go through a depression stage. I did have to go for state assistance to be able to feed my son and myself, which was very, very difficult for me because I've always supported us throughout our lives.
We went to Verifications, Inc. in Minneapolis to find out how all this happened.
When I do my portion on privacy versus the need to know, we will cover it from two different directions, really.
Mary Poquette is the company's chief compliance officer.
When we checked those records, we found 2 convictions. And when we looked at those records, we had a match based upon her name, her full date of birth, her driver's license number, her social security number, and her home address. So certainly there was absolutely no reason to think that that these 2 records actually did not belong to her.
I do have one question, though, because I know as well that you did find that there was another name,
That is
Jacqueline
correct.
Rivera, with a different date of birth.
Right.
Same social security number. But why wouldn't that raise a red flag when you have 2 different names and 2 different dates of birth associated with the same conviction?
Certainly it raised a red flag from the standpoint of there is another name associated with this record, but quite frankly, it's not unusual.
Is it really? It's not unusual?
If I were arrested, I could say my name was Jane Smith. And at that time, there's really no way for the arresting agency to know what my name is. Eventually they will get to do a fingerprint comparison and so on. But as that arrest was made, the arrest was made under the name that I provided.
Do you then, though, send somebody down or do a further search to make sure that you've got the right person?
If an employer is considering an adverse employment decision because of something in the background report, then they are obligated under federal law to notify the person that they are considering taking this action, in this case to Julia, and there are a certain number of days that she would have to contact us if she wanted to dispute anything in the report.
She didn't get back to you.
According to our records, she did not contact us.
Hernandez admits she did not contact verifications. She believed the only way to correct the record was to deal directly with the courthouse.
If she had contacted us, we would have notified her prospective employer that she was disputing something in the background report, and essentially the background is placed on hold while we reinvestigate.